Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Matarese, and before I get started with the episode today, I'd just like to take care of the usual housekeeping. For starters, paid requests are now reopened. If you're interested in submitting a disaster request, please double-check the list of requests I most recently posted to the podcast's Facebook and Tumblr accounts to make sure your request has not already been made. Also, please look through past episodes to verify I haven't already covered the disaster in question. To submit a request, you can send a donation of $30 or more to the podcast PayPal at disasterarea@mail.com, on Venmo at Disaster Area Podcast, or on Cash App at Disaster Area Pod. Just add the name of the disaster to the notes on your donation. If you have an idea for an episode subject, but you're not sure if it qualifies, feel free to message me and I can approve one way or another. If this episode proves anything, I have a very open mind when it comes to which disasters I am willing to cover. The subject from this particular episode was chosen by Kevin, and I'd like to thank them for the request and for the donation. If you'd still like to help support the podcast in another way, you could do so with a one-time donation through PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App, or on a per-episode basis through Patreon at www.patreon.com/disasterareapodcast. A per-episode donation of even as little as $1 an episode can help me do things like pay the rent and keep the lights on. And if you do join the Patreon, you will get new episodes ad-free as soon as I record them, rather than waiting until they are released. So if you do become a patron, I would very much appreciate it. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook at Disaster Area Podcast, on Instagram at Disaster Area Pod, or on Tumblr at Disaster Area-podcast. And I do have a Blue Sky account now for the podcast, although I still need to get used to updating that. Also, please think about rating and reviewing the podcast on whichever podcast app that you might listen to us on, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, wherever that might be. Feel free to leave a review. It's free and it really helps us be seen, or more aptly me, but let's think of ourselves as a group. We're working on this together. Also, as always, the sources for each new episode can be found at disasterareapodcast.wordpress.com and in the episode description, wherever you might be listening to me. So, just a fair warning ahead of time, I do try to keep my language as clean as possible during these episodes, but sometimes people do weird things like add digital orifices onto creatures when they don't actually need to be there. There's only so much to class up some things that will come up in this episode, and sometimes a joke just writes itself. In any event, there's your warning. There is some swearing in a couple of quotes, so keep that in mind. There's going to be some off-color humor, maybe. I'm going to try to be as reeled in as possible, but there's really no way to reel in the nightmare that is about to occur. With all of that taken care of, thank you very much for listening, and welcome to the 250th episode of Disaster Area. Episode 250, Cats, 2019. Release date, December 20th, 2019. The movie Cats was the worst thing to come out of 2019. Okay, fine, the worst thing that didn't kill anyone. But not for lack of trying. There is a quote that goes around the social media sites every so often that is one hell of a curse. It goes a little something like this. May the movie adaptation of your favorite book be terrible. I know just how horrible a curse that can be. My favorite book is The Stand by Stephen King. Okay, the 90s miniseries wasn't that bad. Anyway, if the last couple of months have proven anything, it's that it's more than possible to make a successful and well-done musical translated from the stage to the screen. I have yet to be able to see Wicked, but everything I've heard makes me genuinely angry. I haven't been able to see it yet. Contrast that with everything I heard about Cats prior to this episode, where I got the impression I would spend 2 hours staring at the screen slack-jawed and horrified like I did during the car ride in Hereditary. I should add before we even get into this episode that before writing this episode, I knew 2 things about Cats. It had the song Memories in it, and it's about cats. Anyway, before we get on this ride, please feel free to take whatever intoxicants you might need to get into this confusing and sometimes enraging roller coaster. Okay, are we all set? All right. Okay, then buckle in, folks, at the very least, so you don't run away halfway through. Now, back in 1939, poet T.S. Eliot released Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, a collection of poems which would look more than a little familiar to anyone who's watched or listened to the Broadway musical in question. Each of the poems in the collection is about a different cat, or two cats, or a bunch of cats, all of them with typically weird names like Rumpelteazer and Munkustrap and the vaguely filthy Rum Tum Tugger. It's basically like the fun parts of the early internet without cheeseburgers. Considering the year it was published, you'll be happy to know that you can get all the way to 18% into the ebook before you see a racial slur. Now, I'm sure when you're a little kid in the 1940s, a poetry book about cats with weird names like Jenny Anydots and Bustopher Jones was probably a lot of fun. At least one kid definitely enjoyed it, a young Andrew Lloyd Webber. If you don't know who Andrew Lloyd Webber is, you might know some of the musicals he would go on to compose. Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar, Phantom of the Opera, and inevitably Cats. With Cats, Andrew Lloyd Webber mostly just put the poems to music, which gives off the vibe of... It gives off a vibe of high school students finishing off their assignment at like the very last minute. An assignment that they were supposed to do, by midnight and completely forgot about and squeezed into the last night by doing just as much Monster Energy drink as possible, just downing it constantly. Except if there is any indication, and I cannot see any confirmation for this, but it certainly seems that Andrew Lloyd Webber, possibly given the time period, did an absolutely absurd amount of cocaine to make this musical. I am not saying that he did. I'm just saying that it gives off the vibe of something that was made on a lot of cocaine. So, what's the musical about? The simple answer is cats. We're done. No, it's just 2 hours of cats. And that would be fine if it were 2 hours of real cats scampering around a stage. I would pay to see that. But it's not. There is an actual plot, or at least a flimsy excuse for one, made out of paper clips and string. First, all of the cats are introduced, and then one of them is chosen to die. Sorry, be reborn. Chosen to die just sounds a hell of a lot cooler. The Jellicle cats, Jellicle meaning dear little cat, which nobody bothers to explain until like the last 5 seconds of the movie, but anyway, whatever, come together for a ball where old Deuteronomy chooses one cat to go to the Heaviside Lair, which is basically sending them off to be reborn. There's some fighting and kidnapping involved, but for the most part, it's just introductory songs and prospective reincarnation. It's relatively simplistic. Not in a bad way, per se, but in a way in which children and people who don't speak English and the elderly and disabled might have an easier time following along. If you have certain issues where following this sort of thing might be difficult, maybe this is good for a starter musical. Like I said, kids might just enjoy seeing people running around in cat costumes. Like it's not the sort of thing that you go for like deep thinking, which there's nothing wrong with that. There are lots of Broadway shows that are, more fun than philosophical. Let's put it that way. In May of 1981, Cats debuted in the West End of London. It would remain there for the next 21 years, completing 8,949 performances. Then it debuted on Broadway, where it stayed for 18 years. Seems only fair. The Cat distribution system invaded the theater districts of at least 2 major metropolitan cities and refused to leave, generating hundreds of millions, if not billions, in revenue for both London and New York City. It's kind of hard to get mad at the dancing cats when they're raking in that much cash, excuse me. There are a lot of jokes. If you ever watch TV shows and movies that are made in the 80s and 90s, you will see a lot of jokes, especially if they're set in New York City, references to cats, jokes about the musical, that sort of thing. It's kind of a running joke. Like at a certain point, people realized, hey, it's It's like Broadway 101. Like, you've never been to a musical before, go to Cats. But also kind of, with a little bit of ribbing from people who go to musicals more often. As for the actors and actresses working on the show, things started out really energetic and exciting. Betty Buckley, who played Grisabella in the musical. Grisabella is like the glamour cat, she's called, but she's kind of, run down. So, it's years down the line and things haven't turned out the way that she wanted. I have no idea why that would ring true with me. Anyway, Betty Buckley played Grisabella in the musical, but is probably more well known as the gym teacher from Carrie. To some of you, me especially, shared that, quote, Trevor Nunn, who worked with some of the music, directed me to sing Memories 3 times. He kept saying, more suicidal. For the family-friendly musical. Performers needed to be cat-like and agile, willing to move in strange and silly ways. They practiced during rehearsals and in their off hours, to the point where at least one dancer said she got startled by a dog while walking through New York City. She was just in that frame of mind. The performers also needed to know the stage very well. Not only was the stage raked, or it sort of tilted, but it was also decorated with oversized items to make the actors appear smaller and more cat-like. So you had this big, like a car trunk that they, you could open that the dancers would be in and they would come out of it. You can see it in a commercial that was, that went around, which I will talk about. I will get to that. With dancers tumbling here and there throughout the performances, if they didn't memorize every single inch of that stage, they were likely to backflip the wrong way and injure themselves tumbling into the giant baby buggy. And then there was the fact that, much like actual cats, the actors went wherever they damned well pleased. If you were sitting in the audience for a performance, you could find yourself dealing with a Jellicle cat jumping into your lap or scaling the banisters. The whole thing was a physical nightmare for the performers, because you try walking on hands and knees pretending to be a cat for hours every day for weeks and months and years. Like, it can do a toll on your body. There were a lot of dancers who left the performance, left Cats, not because, they didn't want to have a steady job, but because it was just burning through their body. And another thing that I didn't really want to get into too much, but with Cats coming out in the 80s on Broadway, you're talking about a time when AIDS and HIV and AIDS is starting to become a really big thing. And so a lot of the people who performed in Cats at the very beginning would end up passing away later on because they would have caught the disease. And so somewhere along the line, they may start calling in sick, and the understudies would have to fill in for them. And they just keep doing that until they finally just had to leave because they had caught the virus, and inevitably it progressed to AIDS and they passed away, unfortunately. On the other hand, it meant the actors going out into the studio, the audience, that is, it meant getting close and personal to some of the most famous people on Broadway and of the 1980s. Everybody went to see Cats. It was the thing that you did. So, like, Frank Zappa brought his kids to see the show. They went backstage, and then he took a bunch of people to Studio 54. So there's that. Someone fell in Phil Donahue's lap. Phil Donahue, if you don't know who Phil Donahue was, he had a talk show and in the 80s, and he did all these really, like, hard-hitting interviews with people kind of doing the Oprah Winfrey thing before Oprah Winfrey, but being really tough and just, he was really interesting to watch. I can remember watching him as a kid. I don't know why I was watching as a kid, but I was. Anyway, Phil Donahue went to see it. He was in a box, and one of these dancers climbed up on the edge of the box to, do the cat thing, and fell basically into his lap and kind of had to apologize. Phil didn't seem to be bothered. Someone else tried to pull Bob Fosse out of the audience for a dance on stage, which I don't know if I can blame them. If I was a Broadway dancer and I saw Bob Fosse out in the audience, I would be horribly tempted to grab him and drag him on stage. Bob Fosse, not one to hold back, said, quote, "Don't you fucking touch me." The performer simply replied, "Yes, sir, I'm a big fan." which seems fair. And if you could take the opportunity of exploring the crowd as part of the performance to slip your number into the hand of some cute audience member, more power to you. That apparently happened a lot. They would be dancing and they would go and you know, oh, that guy over there is really cute. And so they would crawl over and like crawl in his lap and then, oh, here you go, slip this in his pocket. So there's something I need y'all to understand about living in the tri-state area in the 80s and 90s. And when I say tri-state, I mean New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. More specifically, Eastern Pennsylvania, because I don't think the whole of Pennsylvania was getting what we were getting. Where I grew up, we got the New York TV channels. And with the New York channels came the New York news and the New York sports and the New York commercials. This meant that at a certain point in the 80s, city channels like WPIX began to play one particular ad for cats, what felt like every 10 minutes. If they didn't specifically break into whatever show was on air to air said commercial, well, it damn well felt like they did. Now, those of you who are from this area already know which commercial I'm talking about. But those of you who don't, this is what the ad was like. Performers in their cat attire would emerge from hidden places on the stage, the trunk of a car, amongst some trash cans, a manhole cover, all looking upward in awe. The music is rising, da 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 da, like that, and the announcer says the following: Cats, the #1 family musical in America. Cats, the world's most thrilling theatrical event. Cats, the magic, the mystery, the memory will live forever. Cats, the 7-time Tony Award winner, the once-in-a-lifetime experience, the most exciting family musical. In a word, Cats, at the Winter Garden Theater. Most of what he's speaking over, for the record, is footage from the end of the musical. They showed you the ending before you even went. In an ad you would have seen before you walked into the theater roughly 11 billion times. So if you did not know what you were getting into, you would know when you got into the theater, oh, wow, I already saw this. But, yeah, you saw that ad constantly. I probably could have recited all of that I just said and just quoted without going back and looking at the actual ad on YouTube to make sure that I had gotten it correct. So that's how often that ad aired. It was a lot. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I had not experienced anything regarding the Broadway musical Save the Song Memories, which I know mostly as the song even theater kids would be embarrassed to perform for auditions. So this weekend, or like several weekends ago at work, I started listening to the original cast recording from 1983 on my headphones and commenting on it to my coworkers. Here are some genuine quotes I said to the people I work with about the songs I got to listen to before I officially gave up. I don't know what the hell a Jellicle cat is, but I now know it does everything. Exactly how much cocaine was Andrew Lloyd Webber on? Exactly how much cocaine were Broadway audiences on? Every song so far has been about a cat and the one thing they do. It feels like a musical about my teenage self introducing a new friend visiting my house to my family's cats. This is Spencer. He will yell at you. This is George. He's having a panic attack. This is Rudy. He will lick your head. Oh, hey, I know this part. It's what you hear right before Cats at the Winter Garden Theater. Yeah, it was just, I gave up. I could not listen anymore. So I feel honesty is the best policy for this next bit. After listening to as much of the cast recording as I could tolerate, my next step was to watch the Broadway recording available to stream on Amazon. Now, I bought the Broadway recording and the movie itself like months ago on Amazon. just put it aside. I was like, I'm going to need these anyway. I bought them. They were sitting there in my, in my stuff, waiting to be watched. I had planned to watch the cast recording, or like the recorded version from Broadway, with as much focus as possible upon first viewing to really pick up on just how ridiculous it was. So this one Monday at midnight, I decided I would hold off on watching it that night. I didn't really feel like doing it, so took a weed gummy so that in an hour or so I could go to sleep without any problems. I kind of relaxed. I put on Dropout. I started doing some cross stitch for a while. And then after a while, I thought, yeah, what the hell? I'm going to put the musical on. This meant that the musical was about 2 minutes in before the gummy started to kick in. Look, under normal circumstances, I can be as snarky as anyone else would watching a 40-year-old musical about dancing cats. Instead, my first viewing of the Broadway version of Cats elicited 2 main reactions from my adult brain while I was still conscious enough to pay attention. The first was responding to every beaten image I recognized from that repetitive ad by shouting, "Come see Cats at the Winter Garden Theater!" in my bedroom. The second was seeing something ridiculous, even for musical theater, and saying, "You had to pretend this was good." As in, you bought tickets, you brought your family, you sat your butts down in the Winter Garden Theater, and as the show went on, your smile remained out of politeness while it slowly became more and more strained because you were trying to be polite and you didn't want to upset anybody, you didn't want to show your kids, but you're just trying to be nice, and the whole time you're thinking, I have to pretend this is good. Now, I should say, despite the way I feel about the quality of Cats, any production which keeps actors, singers, dancers, and crew members employed for longer than a few months is a blessing. Working in the arts is hard, and sometimes you just have to be grateful for whatever you get. For the actors who performed in Cats, they weren't just in a long-running musical, they were in one which won Best Musical at the Tony Awards. Whether or not they deserved it is something for theater nerds to argue about, and I am more than willing to let them argue about it for as long as they want. I am not knowledgeable enough to make that argument, but I'm sure there is a good argument to be had. Whether you were in the London or New York runs, you had something resembling job security, which is a big thing on Broadway. Not a lot of people who work in the arts get that. So for all of my teasing about the musical and the movie, both of them kept artists employed for months, if not years, and for that it has my respect. I have enough respect for everything that we're talking about today that, yes, I'm teasing. Yes, I'm making jokes, but I want you all to understand that the people who do these sorts of things, who make movies for you, who make musicals for you, who do all of this, who do the special effects and the costuming and all of that, do really hard work. And even if it turns out bad, they did something to try and keep you entertained. If you're not entertained, but keep in mind, there are so many people out there who do things like this, creative things, and they work really hard, and and especially in times like this when things are very tough, it can be trying to do that. So if you have somebody who is doing something creative that you really appreciate, just keep them in mind. Keep in mind the people who are making your favorite movies. I just saw a trailer or a teaser trailer for The Old Guard 2, and I love the first movie. It's one of my favorite movies, so I cannot wait to see it. But everybody involved in that is the love of my life. So I'm so grateful to see that. And that I think, even if it's just the grips or the people who are like holding a dolly, like all the people in the background who were doing stuff, craft services, all those people, they are helping to make sure that you are seeing things, that you are being able to see worlds that you could not possibly see before. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this. So even though I'm making fun of this musical and this movie, I still respect everybody involved for trying their best. Although I am going to make fun of some of them. some more than others. Probably one more than others, but we'll see. News of a Cats film was met with, let's say, hesitation. The thing is, when you adapt a Broadway musical for the big screen, it can end up great, or it could turn out uncomfortable for everybody. Somehow, people spontaneously bursting into song over pretty much anything makes more sense on the Broadway stage than on the big screen, and even on Broadway, it's still a little weird. Add in the cat costumes and flimsy excuse for a plot, and things might turn out not so great. The director chosen to run this prospective nightmare fuel was Tom Hopper, who had previously won a Best Director Oscar for The King's Speech, and followed that up 2 years later with the big screen adaptation of Les Miserables, which was nominated for 8 Oscars, none of which were Best Director. But it did win for Best Supporting Actress, Sound Mixing, and Makeup and Hairstyling, so maybe that looked good on his resume for a movie where you have to dress up a bunch of people like cats? I don't know. The thing is, some people quite liked his Les Mis. Clearly the Academy liked it well enough, but plenty of people had their criticisms. Hooper decided to let his actors sing live while performing, which can sometimes be weird. Which worked out well for some, like Anne Hathaway and Eddie Redmayne, who actually had really great voices, and not so much for others, like Russell Crowe, who I don't think anybody liked Russell Crowe's performance in that movie. Given that a lot of musical theater buffs cringed at the possibility of the guy who decided to let Russell Crowe bellow off tune directing Cats. Then casting news began to be released, or to be leaked, or whatever. It's not hard to hear names like Judi Dench, Jennifer Hudson, and Ian McKellen and not be a little hesitantly excited. 2 of those people have Oscars. Ian McKellen has an Oscar nomination, I believe, for Gods and Monsters, I want to say. I'm not exactly sure. Jennifer Hudson has won for another musical. Surely that's a good sign, right? And then there's Idris Elba and Ray Winstone, both of whom have come close to Oscar nominations in their own right. And then you've got singers and dancers, Taylor Swift, who needs no introduction, Jason Derulo, who will introduce himself constantly, Francesca Hayward, a principal ballerina, the Les Twins, 2 of the best hip-hop dancers in the world, and Rebel Wilson, who played an outdated fat joke in the Pitch Perfect movies while occasionally singing. Sometimes well, sometimes not. One of the actors hired to be in the movie was comedian and talk show host James Corden. Some of you may know James Corden, and some of you may not. I envy those of you who don't. But it's not hard to imagine that those of you who do don't particularly like him. I first encountered Corden when he hosted the British comedy panel show about sports, A League of Their Own, where Corden was the most irritating person on the screen even when they made him zip wire into enormous bowling pins or fall into Wipeout-esque pools. Then he popped up on Doctor Who to be irritating, and then for some reason America gave him his own late-night show where he could be irritating all the time. But that didn't stop him from being vocally irritating in multiple animated movies like the Trolls movies, and by being the worst singer in the vehicle in every single carpool karaoke. For reasons which make sense only if you squint in that way that makes your vision blur, this made him qualified to be in a musical, which also means my own car concerts at shameful volumes qualify me to replace Ariana Grande in the second Wicked movie. In any event, how do you film all these actors as cats? Okay, cat people. People cats? Humanoid cat creatures who wouldn't be out of place in a horror movie? Whatever. The point is, the sets would be enlarged to make the actors appear cat-sized against a London backdrop, and the actors would wear lycra, and digital fur technology, that was the term, would take care of the rest later. I guess that was supposed to make them look soft and furry, but as someone who's still getting used to wearing progressive lenses, they mostly just look blurry around the edges. That fur also didn't cover them entirely, so it was really hard not to notice things like the fact that the female cats all had breasts they really didn't do very well covering under their lycra. Like, you're just kind of looking at them going, really? But anyway, obviously, the special effects team had their work cut out for them. But there was one detail which somebody would add, which raised the question of why? Just why? No elaboration. Just why? And that, my friends, was buttholes. I would use the more scientific term for that body part, but we're not here for explanations of wildfire science or aviation engineering. We're here for terrible entertainment decisions. Buttholes are funny when, for example, they're added to an episode of Game Changer, mostly to drive host and producer Sam Reich crazed with laughter about just how much the production is going to have to spend on adding CGI buttholes to a comedy panel show. Cats, however, is not a comedy panel show. It's a relatively serious musical in which, it would turn out, it's hard enough to ignore things like all of the female cats having breasts their costumes do not nearly do enough to hide, or Jason Derulo's crotch being there, or Idris Elba looking like a scrawny werewolf. One can only imagine the fun audiences would have had spotting each and every CGI butthole not trailing a string of tinsel out of it or surrounded by fluffy fur with a piece of poop stuck right there. Yes, okay, this is gross, but I grew up with cats, as I say on a regular basis to Professor. When he sits on the bed with me, with him facing away from me, ew, get this end away from me. This is where the poop comes out. So, yeah, that's what I tend to think about if I'm seeing buttholes on cats. So you're probably asking, who decided to put in buttholes? Somebody made that decision, right? That is a good question. According to a Daily Beast article, even the visual effects team didn't know who did that. One source would tell the Daily Beast, quote, when we were looking at the playbacks, we were like, what the hell? You guys see that? We paused it. We went to call our supervisor, and we're like, there's a fucking asshole in there. There's buttholes. It wasn't prominent, but you saw it. And you were just like, what the hell is that? There's a fucking butthole in there. It wasn't in your face, but at the same time, too, if you're looking, you'll see it. Anyway, after that, someone, or multiple someones, presumably, had to go back and get rid of them all. In July of 2019, the trailer for Cats was released to... confusion is probably the first word to come to mind. A Washington Post article in response was entitled, "The Cats Trailer Dropped. We have 34 questions." I admire writers Travis M. Andrews and Sonia Rao for trimming it down to only 34 questions, or on the other hand, expanding them to something other than, why? Some of the questions they did ask include, if the cats have human mouths, how do they clean themselves? Isn't it illegal for Jason Derulo to be in something without announcing his own name first? And what if we put a laser dot in there? At the bottom of the article is a stock photo of a fluffy Himalayan kitten. The caption reads, open quotes, an actual cat, comma, for comparison. This is not for the trailer for the motion picture Cats. This is not from the trailer for the motion picture Cats. It's just a real cat that they put in there. Plenty of people responded to the trailer, but the cut asked some real experts about human-cat hybrids. Furries. For those of you who don't know what furries are, picture your favorite sports mascot or Disneyland costumed character. Now imagine they're horny. I teased. Furries are great. Most furries are just, they're weird, but they're their own kind of weird, and they're not harming anybody, so whatever. Anyway, the article in question, How Do Furries Feel About the New Cats movie, starts off with an amazing first line. Last Thursday, the trailer for the film adaptation of Cats dropped, and there's nothing we can do about it now. One furry the cut spoke with, Jib Cody, stated, quote, many assume the fandom would be all about this. Okay, it's got cat's ears and tails. But look at it this way. I like Spider-Man, but that doesn't necessarily mean I like spiders. End quote. Another furry who went by the name Schneppy gave a very respectful and thoughtful comment on the trailer, saying that the costumes in the original musical inspired him to make similar outfits later on. When you see the 80s musical, the costumes, I mean, they look like Broadway costumes. They're Lycra and there's a lot of fur and stuff like that. But they are really great in terms of costumes for that era. And I can imagine them inspiring somebody like a furry to, make their own stuff. Schneppy was also concerned that the movie should have done that rather than go with CGI costumes, which I actually agree with. I think maybe they should have tried that. As it was, the movie already looked fake enough without that. But anyway, there were also mentions of other furries where it was kind of a mixed bag in terms of reactions, because some of them were trying to be hopeful. And some of them were just like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. So it was kind of the same thing that a lot of people were feeling, which is, I don't know, man. Yeah, that was kind of the whole thing for a while. Just, I don't know, man. This, I don't know. Behind the scenes, those working on the film had 6 months to prepare a trailer, which bewildered far more than it enchanted. But for 6 months, 6 months for 2.5 minutes of film sounds better than the alternative. The alternative, in this case, being the fact that those same people were asked to do the same thing with the entire 2-hour movie in 4 months. The visual effects team would spend entire days and weeks working on the film. They would be staying at work for like 2 or 3 days at a time, sleeping under their desks, missing out on their friends and family, all to make sure that everything was prepared, edited, and ready in a shamefully short amount of time. This, it turned out, would include removing the buttholes they added in the first place. It turned out that the entire process of making cats for the the visual effects team was a nightmare, mostly because of Tom Hooper. Like I said, Tom Hooper had worked on things like The King's Speech and Les Mis. He wasn't an animation director, and he really didn't have a lot of experience with it or any from the sound of things. Artists working on the movie would share that animation is an ongoing process, and they could show the renderings for the movie's CGI as they went along, which, if you know anything about animation, that's how that works. They start in the little by little as they're going along, adding on to the animation. They will show the progress that they're making so that they don't get all the way to the end and then have the director say, we don't want it like this. And then you have to go back to scratch. If you get to a certain point and you say, this is what we have, is this acceptable to you? Can we move on to the next stage? That's the way that animation works. You have to kind of, it's a team effort. It goes in stages. There's a lot of work involved in that. And you can't just say, well, just show me the finished product. So he would just get angry because they'd be showing him these renderings. They didn't have fur on them yet. They didn't have, all these different things. And he would be mad because they were incomplete. Hooper would supposedly also ask for demonstration videos of actual cats doing the same things as the cats would do in the movie, which, I mean, I don't think I need to clarify that real cats cannot do ballet, breakdancing, or whatever the hell Rebel Wilson was doing. Director Hooper stood before the audience at the New York City premiere on December 16th, 2019, and stated that he'd only just finished editing the film they'd be seeing at like 8 a.m. the previous morning. Now, I'm not the world's biggest movie buff, but I do know enough about movies to know that sometimes this happens. Whether there are reshoots or the director is a perfectionist or there are last-minute plot or casting changes, sometimes this happens with smaller movies when you're working around the clock and you don't really have a lot of money and your budget's really small and it's just you and your buddies. You're working until the very end to get everything done. Sometimes you're pushing right up to that deadline. Still, hearing that from someone who's about to show you a movie with $100 million budget could possibly be a little bit terrifying. So, the movie. Clearly, I prepared ahead of time. I read the poetry, I listened to the cast recording, I watched the Broadway performance. But I put off watching the actual movie until the very last minute. I watched this movie like yesterday. I sent Professor to dog camp for the week. I brought lemon lime soda to mix with cherry vodka for several large preparatory mixed drinks. I moved my coffee table, covered with mini dollhouse pieces and cross-stitch equipment, out of the way. So by the time I sat down to watch the film, I was alone, I was comfy, and I was pleasantly buzzed. Look, let me sum it up for you like this. A bad movie is still a fun movie if you can make fun of it. Rocky Horror has been flying high on that truth for something like 50 years at this point. Half of my favorite disaster movies are ones I can enjoy because I can gleefully laugh at just how ridiculous the situations or characters or plot have become. Being a bad movie isn't a crime. Being a thoroughly unentertaining movie, now that's a crime. Even the incredibly brilliant Requiem for a Dream is entertaining despite being one of the most horrifically uncomfortable movies I have ever seen, and one which I will not watch again. The only part of the movie in which I found myself vaguely interested, and this is Cats I'm talking about, by the way, not Requiem for a Dream, the only time I was remotely interested is when the cats break into a milk bar in London, which then led me to think about if this was the same milk bar in Clockwork Orange, which is when I decided that this movie would be infinitely better if Alex and his droogs arrived and, well, eliminated the problems. Cats does not entertain. It sets up an hour and a half during which you find yourself becoming uplifted. Not by the story or the performances or the music, but by your steadily withering imposter syndrome. Feeling a bit down about your writing skills of late? Well, go watch Cats and realize that you might feel weird about what you've written, but it can't possibly be as bad as that. Lousy singer? I bet you sound better than Rebel Wilson did as Jenny Anydots, or James Corden in Literally Anything as he's rolling around in cat litter on the screen. I started writing as a teenager because I once read a romance novel set on the Titanic that was so badly written that I threw it against the wall and said, I can write better than that. I still have that book, and I occasionally read it to remind myself that yes, it took a while, but I did eventually get to the point where I wrote better than that. And I definitely know I can write a better script than what I watched on Amazon Prime the other day. As an aside, I could have watched Cats free with ads on YouTube apparently, but no, I had to pay real hard cash for it ages ago that I could have spent on things like dog treats. There was, at some point, an animated big screen version of Cats proposed, and more than likely it would have worked better than this. But what we got instead were a bunch of incredibly talented people, and James Corden, being forced into awful costumes accented with even worse CGI, and everyone doing their best to keep this burning circus tent from collapsing. Honestly, the only one who came out of this looking remotely good is Jennifer Hudson, who, despite what they made her look like, nailed memories as she damn well can, and then she floated off out of the movie in a way which I'm sure elicited envy from everybody she was surrounded by and all of the theater goers watching it happen. Take us with you, Jennifer, please. Get us out of here. We need to escape. The bad reviews and social media jokes happened almost immediately. If it wasn't a still photo of Dame Judi Dench appearing in a shot in which her hand is human and still wearing her wedding ring, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Amazon Prime version still has. It was the sudden and unsettling reveal of the existence of the butthole edit, which was unfortunately never actually revealed, more's the pity, although I did, in Googling and looking around, see references to a possible edit that somebody had made, with the buttholes in it. If that's your thing, go nuts. I feel so much has been said already about Cats, particularly in the immediate aftermath of the release, that any joke that I might try at this point is probably been done before. So I'm just going to defer to those who've already made far better comments than I might make now, 5 years later. At Kyle Buchanan said, watching Cats is like stumbling upon an unholy and heretofore unknown genre of porn. Every time these horny fur demons tongue a milk bowl and start moaning, I was certain the FBI would raid the theater. I want you to keep in mind, most of the moaning and tonguing a milk bowl is done by Ian McKellen. So there's that. At Jenny Yamato said, open quotes, true story. I got home after seeing Cats and wouldn't look my own cat in the face for a good hour or so. Close quotes. Alan Core from RTE Ireland said, open quotes, first off, full disclosure, I am not a cat person. Second off, after watching this frankly mortifying film adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, I'm not altogether sure I am a movie person anymore either. Close quotes. The Collider review of the movie asked, can you make a movie so bad the Academy takes back your Best Director Oscar? Asking for Tom Hooper. And Tim Roby at The Telegraph probably summed it up best. Open quotes, the only realistic way to fix Cats would be to spay it. Period. Close quotes. Within days of the movie's release, Universal announced that their visual effects teams were working around the clock to fix some of the mistakes people had already caught, and a new version would be given to theaters on Sunday. But that meant that for several days already, people had been watching and sharing every little mistake and problem they spotted within the film. And then, of course, rumors of the butthole edit popped up, and that just spurred more jokes. The days which followed the release of the movie, I clearly remember them. And it was just, I mean, being on places like Tumblr and Twitter and all of that was just watching this torrent of jokes and internet memes and all kinds of things about Cats. It was unreal. Everybody was obsessed with how awful it was and how much it was like a fever dream. It was one of those movies where you would ask people, because I can remember this, you would ask people, would it be better if I watched it stoned? Would it be better if I watched it drunk? Would it be better if I watched it on mushrooms? Like, people were proposing, what drugs do I need to watch for this to make sense? And I never got a straight answer from anybody who said, you know what drug will work? This one. Nobody. It seemed like everybody was like, no, drugs don't solve this problem. Nothing solves this problem. Just in case you were wondering about the box office numbers on the movie, okay, everybody take a deep breath. According to Box Office Mojo, Cats had a budget of $95 million, which I can only assume was not spent on nearly enough cocaine. On its opening weekend, Cats took in $6,619,870, coming in fifth at the box office after Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, Jumanji: The Next Level, Frozen 2, and Knives Out. All of them, by that time, had been in the theaters for a while, and only Knives Out had not made the budget that Cats had, and it was only, I think, $4 million away from making that $95 million. It was $91 million at the time, so yeah. In total, Cats would make $27 million domestically and $48 million internationally, for a grand total of $75,558,925 worldwide, which is probably about as much as Elon Musk spent on IVF last year. The $27 million is what gets me, because $27 million is impressive if it's something like A Real Pain or like one of the smaller movies that's been nominated for Oscars this year. Things like The Nickel Boys, Sing Sing, like smaller movies that didn't really get as much, they didn't get like Amelia Perez attention, which don't even get me started on Amelia Perez. We could be here all day with me complaining about how terrible it is. But anyway, yeah, $27 million is nothing. It's nothing. That probably didn't even cover like their craft services bill. It's just bad. On the Late Late Show with James Corden would play all kinds of games with his guests, one of which is the revolting Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts. The game goes a little something like this. Corden sits on one side of a table, the guest on the other side. On the table is a spinning ring with plates of disgusting yet edible options. Cod sperm, sliced bull penis, cockroaches, and the ethnically problematic choice of a 1,000-year-old egg, just to name a few. Corden and the guests ask each other questions they'd rather not answer, and if they refuse to answer, they have to eat what the other person put in front of them. Part of the reason I would watch this, not the rest of the show, but this on YouTube, is because when I don't like a celebrity or, a game show host, any sort of TV show personality, this is the same thing that happened with Top Gear. When I don't like people like that, when they annoy me, what I really like to do is watch them suffer on their show. For example, with Top Gear, I used to like when they would have to go on trips to places like Vietnam and Botswana and have to go get a cheap vehicle and make it go through rough terrain, and they would be suffering the entire time. One of them didn't want to eat food from foreign places, and the other one didn't want to do manual labor, and all they did was whine and cry and moan. And it was great to watch privileged white men suffer. In this particular case, here's the thing. Sometimes the guests answers every question without shame, like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Chelsea Handler, both of whom, they answered every single question, if I remember correctly. Chelsea Handler will answer everything that you ask of her. She has no filter, no shame, nothing. And then there's James Corden. Some guests refuse. They'll refuse some. They'll answer others. Some of the funniest ones have been the Kardashians, because they'll ask them questions that will absolutely, they're not going to answer them, or sometimes they will answer them, and you get, juicy stuff, which I don't even like the Kardashians, but I think my favorite was, I think they had Khloe on, and they asked her, did OJ do it? And she ate whatever it was that they gave. So, there's that. But anyway, James Corden. If asked to name the worst guest he's ever had, he eats the cow tongue. If asked to rank other late show hosts, he downs a glass of bird spit. If asked about his film career, he scoops up a spoonful of ants on yogurt without pause. I will freely admit that this particular game is the only section of the Late Show I watched on YouTube, for the same reason, like I said, that I used to watch the episodes of Top Gear where the hosts were dropped in another country to drive an awful vehicle and complained like big babies the entire time. It's the exact same thing. It's him suffering. And the whole reason that he's suffering is that he's too chicken to make a stand and just say, I don't know the names of any of the cameramen who are working tonight. He's trying to be polite, but mostly he's just being a chicken. In one game of Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts, to get to the point, model Chrissy Teigen asked Corden, if you could go back in time, what project would you tell yourself to turn down? Corden said, quote, how long have we got? Then answered, The Lesbian Vampire Killers, in which he played one of the lesbian vampire killers. For providing an answer which, for some ungodly reason, was not cats, he did not have to eat a turkey testicle. On March 16th, 2020, Cats won 6 awards at the Golden Razzies Awards, given to the worst aspects of filmmaking in the previous year. Unsurprisingly, it won Worst Picture, Worst Supporting Actress for Rebel Wilson. Judi Dench, by the way, was also nominated. Worst Supporting Actor for James Corden. Worst Screenplay for Lee Hall and Tom Hooper. Worst Director for Tom Hooper. And Worst Screen Combo for, quote, any two half-feline, half-human hairballs, which I'm pretty sure means anybody, which successfully beat out, quote, Jason Derulo and his CGI neutered bulge. Lead actress Francesca Hayward lost in her own category to Hilary Duff for The Haunting of Sharon Tate, which just goes to show that you can be bad just as long as you're not also being incredibly tacky. Given the timing, no one could attend the Razzies to take their awards home if they actually did. Anyway, the night following the Razzies were the Oscars. Rebel Wilson and James Corden went on stage at one point to present in costume as their Cats characters, saying, open quotes, as cast members of the motion picture Cats, nobody more than us understands the importance of good visual effects. Close quote. The joke may have been funny to others, but someone who worked on the film, Eves McRae, posted to Twitter, quote, "Hey guys, I haven't watched all of the Oscars, but I assume these two were really classy and thanked me for working 80-hour weeks right up until I was laid off and the studio closed, right?" However one might feel about that reaction to the joke, McRae wasn't wrong. It is kind of tacky to be making jokes about how badly things went when the visual effects artists were basically getting screwed and being mistreated behind the scenes. On April 27th, 2023, the final episode of The Late Late Show with James Corden aired, to the relief of late-night audiences and the fear of anyone who loves a good movie musical. James Corden is not in the movie version of Wicked. One can only presume his deal with the devil finally expired. He's actually been in several musicals. He was in Into the Woods. I believe he was in The Prom. He just keeps showing up in musicals, and he needs to stop. It needs to stop. I hope the deal with the devil ended, because this is just... No. Please no, let's not do that again. I'm going to end this episode by telling you about an appearance Andrew Lloyd Webber made on The Tonight Show on April 18th, 2023, a few years out from the nightmare of producing one of the worst films of all time. Lloyd Webber told host Jimmy Fallon, quote, "I am a cat person. Well, I was a total cat person until I saw the Cats movie." After the audience gave him a standing ovation, Lloyd Webber continued, quote, "What happened to the Cats movie was, during the course of it being, as it were, shot, which I hope the whole film would have been, I bought this little puppy, and he was called Mojito. He's a little Havanese dog. He comes from Cuba." Close quote. He then attempted to request that he bring Mojito on board a plane as an emotional support dog. The airline wrote back requesting a doctor's note. Lloyd Webber simply responded to the letter from the airline with something along the lines of, "I wrote cats and look what they turned it into." He got permission to take the dog with him. There was also another part that I didn't add, which is, I guess, that during the production, Andrew Lloyd Webber called Universal at some point and said something along the lines of, "You've better come down here and get a handle on what's going on, or you're going to have a car crash on your hands." Basically, and Universal did nothing. So there's that. I'm just really mad. I love a bad movie. A bad, entertaining movie is a lot of fun. You can make fun of it so well. And the thing is that the reason that I drank, that I had a couple of drinks before I sat down to watch the movie, is because, if I have a couple of drinks, I loosen up, I get a little funnier. It's not the same thing as when I get stoned. I end up not being funnier. I'm mostly just stoned. I mostly just want to take a nap. But when it comes to drinking, I was kind of hoping that if I did that, I would be able to be a little sillier, and I couldn't scrounge up anything. Probably the worst crime Cats commits as a film is that you cannot even laugh at it. You can't even laugh at it. It's so weird, and it's so uncanny valley. Everything about the cats in the movie is just weird, and some of them are wearing clothes and some of them are not wearing clothes, and why are we doing this? And Francesca Hayward, who I guess it's her first time acting. I don't know if that's true or not. I believe it was her first time, her first acting gig. And she mostly spends the entire movie staring at other people, other cats, with this childlike awe. And sometimes it gets a little erotic, and you're kind of torn between, oh, she's a little girl and she's a kitten, and okay, what the hell is she doing staring at Rum Tum Tugger like that? It's very, very weird. Weird, to say the very least. There is just so much about the movie Cats that is a horror show. It is absolutely horrific. And I had somebody, my therapist actually, I was talking to, said, I should probably go watch it. And I'm like, you should not pay money to watch this movie. You should revel in the fact that you don't want to watch this movie. You can actually watch it for free on YouTube, but you should not do that. You should not do that. There are other better movies in the world. The Substance is brilliant. I haven't gotten to finish watching A Better Man, or A Different Man, excuse me. The Better Man's the monkey movie. A Different Man, with Sebastian Stan, which is amazing. What I saw of it anyway. I hear A Real Pain is fantastic as well. I would not recommend Emilia Perez. It is just so problematic on so many levels in regards to its coverage of Mexican culture and transgender issues and the things that that transgender women have to go through, and there's just so much wrong with it. Trying to think what other movies were really good that are nominated for Oscars. Again, I still haven't seen Wicked, which is really frustrating. But when the Oscar nominations came out last week, I was happy for, I'm happy for like Coleman Domingo. He's one of the greatest actors we have working right now, and I'm so glad that he continues to get nominated. I just there are plenty of people who I'm thrilled to see. I'm very happy Demi Moore is nominated. I'm actually rooting for her, not just because she hasn't been recognized with awards for so long, but also because I am a horror movie buff, and I don't think that the Oscars give enough respect to horror movies. They've shafted Lupita Nyong'o for Us, and most notoriously Toni Collette for Hereditary, who should not only have been nominated, she probably should have won for Best Actress. Like there's just so much about the Academy's response to horror movies that pisses me off. And so I'm really, really thrilled and happy that not only that Substance is getting the recognition it rightly deserves, but also that Demi Moore it has a really good chance of winning an Oscar, which would be amazing. I would love that. She is my favorite story this year, and I want her to win. I'm going to talk about the Oscars. I can't help it. It's this or everything else that's going on in the world, and I'd much rather talk about Demi Moore. But if you're going to watch The Substance, I will say, if you are very unsettled by body horror, if it's not something that you're particularly fond of, just keep that in mind. It is a body horror movie, and so you're going to see a lot of that. And it gets a little intense, and even for a body horror movie. But it's great. It's fantastic. It's wonderful, and it's just really well done. I loved every second of it. I can't wait to watch it again. But yeah, I'm going to avoid talking about anything else that's going on right now because this is a fun episode. And I am not going to talk about anything else that is, obviously some things have happened in this month that are not good. And I did talk about the wildfires in the past, the most recent little thing that I did update, so you know what's going on with me right now. I am I'm taking my time. I'm getting I think I'm getting a little caught up in everything that's going on, trying to help out where I can. And so it's become very much a fight about trying to keep my mental health going and doing well. I actually spent the entire week cleaning my apartment. My apartment is so clean that the depression pile of laundry that has been sitting in my kitchen for months is gone. I hung it up, folded things, put them away, matched socks. I vacuumed the floor underneath where it was. It's clean. It's like it was never there. Give it a month, it'll probably be back. But whatever. I cleaned my apartment. I think I deserve a treat. I deserve a reward. I deserve $1 million and a nice little house and a yard for Professor. That's what I deserve. But anyway, but I've really been trying to make sure that I take time out of the day to not look at the internet, to not doom scroll or anything like that, to put away the computer, put away the cell phone for the most part, and just sit down for a while, put on a movie or put on, Dropout's always good for putting, sort of comfort, putting in the background. And I will cross stitch, or I will, I don't know what anybody else does as a hobby. My mom paints rocks. So she does that. But I mean, like, I think that we all need to be finding something that makes us happy, makes us laugh, or just keeps us comforted for right now. Because I'll tell you right now, if I could sit down and I could just cross stitch for a week at this point, I think it would make me so relaxed. I'm getting to a point with the project that I'm working on where you're really starting to see the image come up, and it's amazing. Just the way that it is starting to look like an actual picture and not just like a bunch of little stitches that I made. So that sense of accomplishment is coming through. I also printed out all of my 3 most important first drafts or works in progress that I want to get finished so I can submit them to publishers this year. With everything that's going on, I'm just kind of focusing on me and what I need to do to make this a successful year. I'm not trying to focus on losing weight or anything like that. That's not even my priority. I am focusing on just keeping a healthy mind, keeping stepping back from things when I need to, and having a good laugh at things like the Cats movie. Although I didn't do much laughing except when I was high and watching the musical. And mostly because I was making myself laugh by consistently saying, "Come see Cats at the Winter Garden Theater." Keep having to back away from the microphone when I do that. It really is. It was one of those commercials. Like, everybody has those commercials where you grew up with them and they are stuck in your brain and they never leave. That commercial has been stuck in my head since I was a child, and the instant I remembered it, it has not left my brain since. I have had that in my head for 2 weeks and it is not going away. Just da 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 da. Just this da 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 da. I don't want to go through the whole thing, but yeah, it's so weird, and I don't know why people went to see it. My mom was like, "Oh, I saw it twice," and I was just like, "Well, you didn't take me, did you?" I don't think I think she would have said if she took me. I don't remember ever going to, like I said, I've never gone to one before. I think Come From Away. I think that was my first one. As far as I know, Come From Away was my first one, and then Six the last time I went to New York City. I would love to go back to New York City this year, but I'm gonna have to sell a kidney if I want to do that. I want to go and do do the highfalutin things. If you want to use like a country term. I want to do highfalutin things. I want to go to the opera and see the ballet and the orchestra and all that. Like, it's just a real urge to see all those things. But unfortunately, I am so very broke unless I don't know. Unless I win the lottery, this isn't happening. So I'm just going to have to wait until next year to do it. But yeah, I am so happy that I finally got to do this. It's really great because I think we all needed a little break from disaster, especially given the events of the past few weeks and the past few days. I think if the most serious disaster we talk about on this episode is whatever James Corden was doing during that entire movie, then that we can handle. And I just have to say to you guys that, take care of yourselves. Things are really weird right now. And the only thing that I think is a problem, like in terms of not overdoing things, is just remember to take a break, and if you feel like you have to step away from something, do it, because it's going to be a long few years, and things are difficult, and people are strange and say weird things, and you kind of have to listen to listen to people say things that don't make any sense whatsoever, and you're gonna have to be the one standing there with common sense and decency and empathy and respect, and try to figure out how to tell someone that they're a nitwit without being rude, which is a lot easier. It's a lot harder to do when you're like face to face. It's a lot easier online, but even then, it's hard. So I wanted to thank you guys for being patient. The last couple of months have been difficult all around for all of us, and for me, I'm having money difficulties, and I'm having a lot of stress. So a little bit at a time, but getting over this hill, I think, is a hill. Finishing this episode, it's a hill I needed to get over, because I loved doing this episode, but also it is really hard for me to do something different than I normally do. I'm so used now to writing episodes about like plane crashes and wildfires and shipwrecks that I can do it in my sleep, but I have a much harder time being a little sillier and doing this. Although I can be silly, I can tell jokes, and I can do it all the time. I do it on this podcast in serious episodes about disasters, and yet, yeah. I can't believe it took me as long as it did to write this. Probably didn't help that every time I started trying to do parts of the background for this episode so that I would be prepared, I would end up rolling my eyes and turning off the ebook, or turning off Spotify, or turning off Amazon. It was just really bad all around. Cats is not my thing. I liked Come From Away, and I liked Six, and there are other musicals I would love to see, but Cats, not one of them. Nope, not one of them. I'd like to go play with some cats. Anybody has some kittens or anything, I would love to do that. Like I said, Professor's not here right now. He's at camp, so he's playing with other dogs. He's not here for me to snuggle or play with or anything like that. And I'm deprived, and I'm missing him. He's also going to be there all weekend long, so I'm starting to get to that point where I'm having like pet withdrawal. So yeah, all I'm thinking about is kittens and playing with kittens. It's really bad. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your patience. Please take care of yourself. Make sure you're drinking your water, taking your meds, doing, getting up out of that chair if you've been sitting there too long, and just stretching. If you feel like you have to go to the bathroom and give yourself, 5 minutes to de-stress when you're at work, go do that. If you're feeling like you need a day to just curl up under the electric blanket and read a book and drink a hot chocolate, then, do that. Whatever you feel like you need to do in these trying times, do it. So with all of that finished, stay safe.